What's up guys, my name's Brandon and today Apple released iOS 16.6 Beta 5 for registered developers and soon for public beta testers. Now along with this update, Apple did also push out a security response update for those on iOS 16.5.1. This is a very important update and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But as far as other betas go, Apple did also release the 5th beta for iPadOS 16.6, macOS 13.5, watchOS 9.6, tvOS 16.6, and HomePodOS 16.6. And taking a look at the size of Beta 5, you can see it comes in at a clean 476 megabytes on my iPhone 12 Pro Max. Now, if we take a look at the build number here for this 5th beta, you will notice that we have an A at the end there. It's 20G5070A. So that means that we should see an RC build next, since we have that A at the end of the build number. And then down here, the modem firmware remains unchanged. And like I mentioned at the top of this video, in addition to this new 16.6 beta update, Apple did also drop a security response update for 16.5.1. And before we jump into the 16.6 details, I want to discuss this. So you will notice this is what the security response update will look like. It is a very small update. It should be like under 3 megabytes and it should install very quick. But this is a very important update. And by the way, if you're not noticing this update populate on your device, you might need to go into Settings, General, Software Updates, and then right here under Automatic Updates, make sure that this Security Responses and System Files toggle is enabled. Okay, so the reason this security update is so important is because it patches a bug that may have been actively exploited out in the wild. And if you take a look at Apple's page here for the security updates, it shows that this is a WebKit bug, and the impact is processing web content may lead to arbitrary code execution, and Apple is aware of a report that this issue may have been actively exploited. And the description shows that the issue was addressed with improved checks, and you'll notice the CVE number down there as well, and this was reported by an anonymous researcher. So very important. Now this was also pushed out for those on macOS Ventura. So it is the same bug with the same CVE. So if you are on macOS Ventura 13.4.1, you will also see this security response update populate. And by the way, this security response update could be why we did not see iOS 17 public beta 1 at the normal 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now you might be wondering also on 16.6 beta 5, do you have this patch built in? And I would say yes, most likely you will have the security response update patch built in to 16.6 beta 5, but not in iOS 17 beta 3. If this bug even impacts iOS 17 to begin with, you likely will not have a patch until the next release. So yeah, if you're still on 16.5.1 or even on a previous beta version, you might want to go ahead and update as soon as possible. Okay, so anyways, let's turn our attention back to iOS 16.6 beta 5. Now, there's really nothing new at all in the software. I will just say that right off the bat. The contact key verification is still nowhere to be found. If you search inside of the settings here for contact key, you will notice that nothing shows up. That of course is the feature that we saw hinted at in an earlier beta. We've not seen that actually release here on 16.6 at all. It could come in the final release. It could come in 16.7 later on, or Apple may just decide to push this until iOS 17 or even later. But that's really the only legit feature / change that we've seen in 16.6. If you guys remember early on as well, we did see a really strange kind of feature of screen recording via Siri, and that was in 16.5 beta 1, and that mysteriously just never reappeared. So that could also be something Apple is kind of testing and maybe releasing in a future version. Now, this build here of 16.6's beta 5 is an A build. So that means that the software should run better overall in terms of performance, battery life. Pretty much everything should be better on this build since we went from a D, back-to-back D builds to an A build. That in theory should, lead to better performance and battery life on your device. And while we're on the subject of performance and battery life, I do want to share my Geekbench 6 test that I just ran. So I scored a 2125 on the single core and a 4988 on the multi-core. Again, this is using my 12 Pro Max. So pretty solid scores, I would say. And then as far as battery life goes, unfortunately, I am not using 16.6 full time on my main device. I am using iOS 17. I am testing the iOS 17 betas, but I've not really heard anything negative about the battery life in 16.6. And I would assume again here with an A build on beta 5, going into the RC right before the final, you should have relatively good battery life. Okay, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. And let's start with iOS 16 and 16.6 specifically. So the next version of 16.6 is most likely going to be the RC build. So since we got an A, usually RC comes right after that. Now there is a slim possibility that this version here, this beta 5, is the RC build in disguise. That's happened before, but I would expect to see the RC either later this week or next week, and then we should see the final release the following week after the RC build. And then as far as 16.7 goes, we should see a 16.7 beta or even the RC. We're starting off with the RC in August and potentially a final release either late August or early September. But as far as iOS 17 goes, I would expect to see the first public beta for iOS 17 come as early as later today on the 10th, if not sometime later this week. And if you're on the developer betas for iOS 17, I would expect iOS 17 developer beta 4 to come next week on the week of the 17th. And then of course the final release for iOS 17 is not going to come until sometime in September, most likely on the same week as the new iPhones. So there you have it. That is iOS 16.6 beta 5. Not really a ton going on at all, and that's really been the case throughout iOS 16.6. And even looking at the release notes here, you can see there's really nothing there, just the same known issues that we've seen for quite a while now for the past few betas. And you guys might have also noticed that I did not make a video on beta 4 for 16.6, and the reason for that is because there was literally nothing to talk about with that update. At least in this video rather, I'm able to talk about the security response update and a few other minor things as far as the release dates and things like that. But, not a ton going on, but I still wanted to cover it just for those other miscellaneous things to talk about. Expect the final release within the next couple of weeks. Nothing major in that update, but we should see some pretty substantial security updates if you are not on 16.5.1. The security response update is going to be the main bug we're going to see patched, but still, you're going to want to update to 16.6 if you are still on 16.5.1 or 16.5. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe for more iOS 16 and especially iOS 17 coverage. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.